Look at your last receipt. Coffee, groceries, a t-shirt, maybe something you ordered at 2 a.m. and instantly regretted. Now look at that little line near the bottom. Sales tax. It's so normal most of us barely notice it. But here's the weird part. For a huge chunk of American history, that line didn't exist. No statewide sales tax on everyday purchases. No automatic percentage added at checkout. And somehow, America still built roads, schools, courthouses, ports, canals, and entire cities. So, where did the money come from? Because governments don't run on good intentions. Somebody always pays. And before sales tax, America had some very strange ways of collecting that money. Some were clever, some were unfair, some were downright dark. Let's go back to a time when buying a loaf of bread didn't help fund the state, but owning a farm, drinking whiskey, or even trying to vote just might. Think about what America looked like in the early days. Huge distances, small towns, dirt roads, farms everywhere. No internet, no credit cards, no payroll software. No easy way for the government to know exactly how much money people made. So if a state needed money, it had a problem. How do you tax people when you can't really track their income? The answer was simple. Tax what you can see. Land, houses, barns, animals, shops, anything that stayed in one place long enough for an official to find it. And that's why property taxes became the backbone of state and local government. If you owned land, the government knew where to find you. Your farm wasn't going anywhere. A local assessor would come through town, estimate what you owned, and decide what you owed. Sounds straightforward, right? Not exactly, because early assessments could be messy and very political. Maybe your farm was valued high. Maybe your neighbor's land got valued low. Maybe the assessor happened to be friends with your neighbor. Funny how that can happen. So while property taxes helped keep local government alive, they also created anger, especially for farmers. A farmer might own land, but that didn't mean he had cash in his pocket. If prices dropped, he still owed taxes. If the bank came calling, well, the tax collector might be right behind them. And here's the bigger issue. Wealthy people often had ways to keep some wealth out of sight. Money could be in business deals, loans, bonds, or other assets that were much harder to measure. But a small farmhouse, a field, a barn, everybody could see those. So the visible wealth often carried the heaviest burden. But property tax was only one piece of the puzzle. Because while states were looking at farms and buildings, the federal government was staring at the ocean. In the early United States, Washington relied heavily on tariffs. A tariff is basically a tax on imported goods. A ship arrives from overseas. It's carrying tea, cloth, tools, sugar, glass, or anything else people want to buy. Before those goods enter the country, the government takes its cut. That was smart for one big reason. You didn't need tax collectors chasing people across thousands of miles of countryside. You just needed officers at the ports. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Charleston. The ships came to them, and the money came with the ships. For much of the 1800s, tariffs were one of the federal government's biggest sources of income. But don't get it twisted. Just because the importer paid the tax first doesn't mean regular people didn't feel it. The importer raised prices, the store owner raised prices, and then families paid more at the counter. So, yes, there may not have been a separate sales tax line on the receipt, but taxes were still hiding inside the price. That's the thing about taxes. Sometimes you see them, sometimes you don't, but somebody almost always ends up paying. Now, let's talk about one product that caused a serious problem: whiskey. Today, taxing alcohol might not sound shocking, but back then, whiskey was a big deal. For many frontier farmers, it wasn't just a drink. Grain was heavy, hard to transport, easy to spoil. But turn that grain into whiskey? Now it was easier to carry, easier to sell, and worth more. For some farmers, whiskey was almost like money. Then the federal government put an excise tax on it, and people were furious, especially in western Pennsylvania. They didn't see it as a normal tax. They saw it as the government squeezing people who were already struggling. Tax collectors were threatened. Some were attacked. The situation got so serious that President George Washington called up a militia. Yes, the same Washington from the history books. The first president of the United States was dealing with angry citizens over taxes. Sound familiar? The rebellion eventually faded, but the message was clear. The new American government had power, and it was willing to use that power to collect revenue. That's important, because every tax system has two sides: the rule on paper and what happens when someone refuses to pay. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. Some states thought, why keep raising taxes when we can make money another way? Their answer? Build huge projects, canals, roads, rail lines, banks. The dream was simple: borrow money, build something useful, charge tolls or earn profits, pay off the debt. Everybody wins. And for a while, it looked like a brilliant plan. The Erie Canal in New York became the big success story. It connected eastern markets with the Great Lakes region and helped turn New York into an economic powerhouse. People saw that success and thought, we need one too. So states rushed in. They borrowed heavily. They launched big projects. They made bold promises. New trade routes, new towns, more jobs, more money. But there was one problem. Not every project was the Erie Canal. Some routes didn't have enough traffic. Some projects cost way more than expected. Some were built in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then the economy crashed, and suddenly states had giant debts with no easy way to pay them back. A number of states ended up defaulting in the 1840s. That was a disaster. Investors lost trust, governments got nervous, and many states started putting stricter limits on borrowing. So the big idea of states making money like a business, it sounded great until the bills showed up. But if taxes were unpopular and debt was risky, what if the government could get people to hand over money willingly? That's where lotteries came in. Before modern state lotteries, America already had lotteries everywhere. They helped fund public projects, schools, roads, buildings, and even major institutions. The pitch was perfect. Nobody is forcing you to pay. You buy a ticket if you want. You might win big, and part of the money goes to a public cause. Easy. But think about it for a second. A lottery is not really free money. It's money collected from people chasing a dream, and the people most likely to chase that dream are often the people who need a break the most. That made lotteries powerful, but also controversial. Then came the scandals: fraud, missing money, dishonest operators, fake promises. Eventually, public trust collapsed, and many states turned against lotteries for a long time. Still, the idea never disappeared, because from a government's point of view, a lottery has one huge advantage. People don't call it a tax, even when it acts like one. Now we need to talk about a tax that was far more than a way to raise money: the poll tax. A poll tax was a flat amount charged per person. Rich or poor, the amount could be the same. That might sound equal, but it wasn't fair. A few dollars might mean nothing to a wealthy man. To a poor worker, it could mean food, rent, or medicine. And in parts of the South, poll taxes were tied to voting. If you didn't pay, you couldn't vote. That made the tax something much more dangerous. It became a tool of exclusion, a way to block poor citizens and Black Americans from participating in democracy. So when we talk about old taxes, we're not only talking about money, we're talking about power. Who gets heard? Who gets ignored? Who can influence government? And who gets shut out before they even reach the ballot box? That's the part of tax history people often skip, but it matters. A tax can build a road, or it can build a wall between citizens and their rights. By the late 1920s, property taxes were still incredibly important for local governments. Then came the Great Depression, and suddenly the old system started breaking down. Property values fell, businesses closed, people lost jobs, families couldn't pay their bills, and if people can't pay property taxes, cities and states can't keep bringing in revenue. It was a nightmare. Governments needed money more than ever. People needed public services more than ever, but the old sources weren't reliable enough. So states began looking for a new answer, something broad, something steady, something collected in small amounts over and over, not once a year, not only from landowners, not only from businesses, purchases, from everyday buying. And in 1930, Mississippi introduced the first broad modern state sales tax. At first, it wasn't some exciting new idea. It was survival, a response to a financial emergency. But other states noticed, because sales tax had a major advantage. Every purchase created revenue. A shirt, a chair, a meal, a radio. 100 small transactions could become millions of dollars for the state. And just like that, the checkout counter became one of the most important places in American government finance. So next time you see sales tax on a receipt, remember this. That tiny number didn't appear out of nowhere. It came after centuries of property taxes, port taxes, whiskey taxes, tolls, lotteries, failed projects, debt crises, and political fights. America didn't go from no taxes to sales tax. America went from one complicated system to another. The difference is, today, the tax is right there in front of you, printed clearly at the bottom of the receipt. A few dollars, maybe less, easy to ignore. But behind that one line is a much bigger question. Who should pay for the things a society needs? And maybe the even bigger question is this: who ends up paying the most?